Hello everyone, so today's video is demonstrations of practices in shamanism. And today I'm joined once again by Ashley. Welcome back to the channel, Ashley.
Thanks for having me again.
No problem. And I have a lot right here in front of me, so I'm going to try to get through it within the length of this video, and then Ashley's going to give some feedback as we go along. So first of all, I have this dragon's blood incense burning. It's one of my most empowering incense. I feel its increased vibration of a room. It feels very cleansing as well because of that frankincense, of course. I have a white and a red candle. The white symbolizes my path overall, and the red symbolizes my path in blood magic, and I consider that my left-hand path in a way. I also have a couple little votive candles here. If you're interested in what kind of incense I like to buy, it's usually HEM, and this is what the package looks like for Dragon's Blood. And what I'm about to do is go ahead and light some sage here. Now, white sage is extremely pungent for a lot of people. It throws a lot of people off. A lot of people don't like the smell. But for me, it's very cleansing. And it actually feels like I'm in the womb of the earth when I burn it. And I fill up this room with it. And the smoke is just so thick, it feels like I'm in a womb somehow, if that makes any sense. It's like a cleansing womb in a way of the earth. So I burn it quite often. And I usually use this shell or a shell equivalent that has a few holes in the side so you get some ventilation. Then I'll lay pieces of white sage into this shell. So do you have anything you'd like to share on white sage as far as you using it?
Yeah, I also use sage, but I use it more in a bundle. So like, here's a bundle sage that I use. Yeah, and I also use it with like a feather. Oftentimes when I'm like saging, I have see this feather. Pretty cool, right?
You
Yeah.
can kind of anoint yourself with the smoke, and you can kind of anoint the room
Well,
with it as you kind of cast it out. That's what I usually
yeah,
do anyway.
I use the feather I kind of fan it like that,
Hmm.
and I also use it like if I'm blowing an intention into a person, like if I'm leading a shamanic journey, I'll blow
Hmm.
the intention and I'll use the feather to fan them.
That makes sense. I always try to buy organic white sage. It's usually the best, but any white sage in a pinch can do, which is usually what I have available. So I'm gonna go ahead and like you said, I'd usually buy it in a bundle, but I usually cut the strings and kind of take off pieces. All right, so the next thing I'd like to talk about is anointing oneself with a spiritual oil. I've done this in other videos. This is Crown of Success oil you can actually find on Amazon. It's a pagan oil. And depending upon the rune, I will draw the rune upon my head in that oil as to anoint myself. So right now, what I'm going to do is draw a rune that I'll be using in 3 different ways as we progress through this video. And you'll see that, assuming I can get the bag open. There we go. So I'm going to randomly draw a rune, and when I draw a rune, I'm using the Elder Futhark. It's a northern European runic alphabet. You have Anglo-Saxon alphabet, Lower Futhark, but the Elder Futhark is the original one in my opinion and the most effective as far as connecting to these ancient primordial spirits that make up the fabric of reality that are the runes. So I'm going to close my eyes, reach into this black bag of runes that I made, and just kind of clear my head for a second. Grab one, pull it out, look at it. Okay, so this is interesting. We have Kinaz. It looks like a sideways arrow. Um, Kinaz is a rune of opening, and this is very interesting that it came with this shamanic video. So it's a rune of opening. So I'll put that rune aside and place my bag off of the table, and I'll take the oil and with Kinaz in mind, put some of the oil onto my finger and just, I usually just put my finger in the end of the bottle, then pour it over. But you can just kind of get a dropper and do the same thing if you just want to put a little less on your finger. And then I'll write Kinaz, 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 Kinaz. And then what I have here is a bowl of ash. Now, this bowl of ash is from either dragon's blood, myrrh, or frankincense that I burn. I'll put a little bit of the ash that comes off the incense stick into this bowl. And then I also recently put a rune word on a piece of parchment, either brown or white. And I drew that in dove's blood ink, which is very spiritual ink. and then I burned it, and I burned it into this ash. Now, you want some dark ash like that from certain spells to combine with the incense ash. Otherwise, you won't get a very like dark rune if you're doing a rune. You won't get a dark symbol that feels powerful and that other people can view if you're going to do that as well. So I'll just put some of this ash on the same finger that I put the oil on, and I'll repeat again: Kinaz, 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 Kinaz. And now that I'm anointed with that rune, we'll go ahead and continue. Now, do you anoint yourself with anything, Ashley, as far as on your forehead?
Yeah, actually, I make it part of my daily practice. I anoint myself with, I have an assortment of essential oils over here, but I actually use rose oil quite often. Plus, just an assortment of different blends that I make from essential oils. I usually will put it on different chakra points, and then I put it in my hair because I think that my hair is kind of an energetic connector, like to both the earth and the atmosphere around me.
That makes sense. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to go ahead and trim off a piece of parchment that we will talk about in a second. But with this piece, go ahead.
I would say that they actually sell like a sage spray for people who have asthma or who are like very affected by like smoke, who can't be around smoke. So you can actually buy a sage spray and you can use that to clear.
I actually didn't know that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so once again, I'm taking my brown piece of parchment. I like to use white parchment usually, but brown will work as long as it's parchment. So what I'm going to do with this is, since I drew the rune Kinaz, put this oil up for a second. Since I drew that rune Kinaz, I'm going to be writing that rune with my own blood on this piece of parchment. Now, I cannot encourage you to practice blood magic, anybody out there, but if you're going to do it, act safely, use some alcohol, spray yourself with alcohol so that you're disinfected. And then if you want to use just a piercing needle, a lancet, that just to use a little bit of blood from a finger, just one quick pierce, very easy, and it cleans off and heals very easy. For this ritual, I'm actually going to use a razor, and that's because I need a little bit more blood for what I'm going to do. And once again, when it comes to blood magic, you don't really need a lot. It's not about the quantity of blood, it's about the intention and the fact that it is your own blood. It is your own sacred elixir that you are going to be using to basically affect your will. So now that I have some blood produced, I'll be writing Kinaz with a paintbrush from the cut onto this piece of parchment. And as I'm writing Kinaz, I will say Kinaz, 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 Kinaz. And you might want to trace it about 3 times. Kinaz, 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 Kinaz. Clearly written onto that piece of parchment there. Now that we have that written in my blood, what I'm going to do is actually refer to a Japanese samurai practice. Now, before battle, a lot of samurai, not all, would actually write Buddhist sutras onto a piece of paper, burn it over their sake, and then place the ashes into their drink so that it would basically imbue them with the power of that sutra, of course, drinking the sake. So I'm going to burn this rune right over my drink. Be very careful when you're burning a rune, so you don't burn yourself. Then I'm going to, once again, the alcohol is kind of a disinfectant for anything that might be in the paper that's not good for you. Make sure the ash is kind of separated and spread around. And then I'll be drinking this through the course of whatever we're going to talk about next. One sec. Not the best taste, but I do feel the energy coming into me. So, Ashley, as far as ingesting herbs or anything like that, is there something that you'd recommend or something that you do as far as herbs that you eat or certain spiritual components that you do that with?
Well, any herb that I use, and I'm an herbalist, so any herb that I use, I take into consideration the magical, and then the practical uses of the herb.
Hmm.
I've a lot of different herbs. I mean, I'm an herbalist, so there's so many I don't really want to
Yeah,
list them. But I
yeah.
basically integrate herbs into my daily life yet again. I start the day out. I have this. Okay, so I have this is a gourd that's actually from Brazil,
Uh-huh.
and I'll put like different herbs in it, and then I'll put the hot water straight into it, and then I'll drink it with what's called a bombilla. So
Uh-huh.
it seems to like hold it in a sacred fashion. I mean, it's from the Amazon rainforest,
Yeah,
so um, I think a lot of it's about intention with herbs because they do actually work on a physical level, but also they do work shamanically when we have that intention.
definitely. And just as a side note, as we've been talking, I've been kind of placing excess blood into this little piece of pottery so that if I wanted to use it later, it'd be there for me to use. And if it's dried blood, it can be just as effective. Just mix it with a little bit of water as long as it's fairly fresh. Now, moving on to the next thing, I'm actually going to be going to a voodoo practice. Now, using my own blood once again, I'm going to do something very similar. So since I drew Kinaz, usually in voodoo, it's not runes. Usually it's either a veve or some kind of herb or some kind of oil that you're just placing on the wound. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write Kinaz onto this piece of parchment that I clipped. Kinaz, 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 Kinaz. Now that I've done that, I'm going to place it across the wound after I apply some spiritual oil. Now, once again, usually it's just oil or herbs. So I'm going to apply this Crown of Success Victory oil over the cut. And I'm going to place the parchment over that, stick it there, and then I'm going to tie it just like in Voodoo. Usually use a bandana, something that signifies what you're doing. So this red bandana signifies the blood magic that I'm doing, and really making that rune one with me through my sacred elixir. So I'm using red consciously, not just because I have it just available. And then I'm going to do the best I can, tying it nice and firm. A lot of the time, you might want to keep it there for a whole night or a day. But honestly, as long as the intention is set, as long as the oil is there, uh, the herb, or in this case the rune is there, and it kind of circulates throughout your body, especially with the membrane of the spiritual oil, then you don't need to keep it there, but for 3 to 7 hours. Just make sure it's firm so that it doesn't come loose, so that the magic can be imbued into your system. So let's go ahead and cover up that oil. And at this point, let me drink a little bit more of this. At this point, we'll go to talking about ancestors. Now, there is one family member in my life that was pretty close to me and my family, and that's my uncle. Now, he passed a while back, but he lives out in the country a bit, and I used to gather petrified wood from his property. So this is a piece of petrified wood that I gathered from my uncle's property, and it has a strong connection to him. So when we're talking about calling upon ancestors, connecting with them, communicating with them, you might want to use something like a pendulum. You might even want to use a Ouija board. But I find that if I place this on an ancestral shrine, let's say I have two candles, let's say I've made an offering of some kind of alcohol, some kind of herbs, or some kind of food that they liked in life, or some kind of just something that they liked in life as far as if somebody liked guns, you can add a bullet, something like that. I find that it's much easier for me to connect with them by clearing my mind and allowing thoughts to come in my mind, just making sure I have everything set up properly. So when it comes to, ancestral or family communication with somebody who's passed, Ashley, do you have any recommendations?
Well, I actually tell people to start with making an ancestral altar, and usually you would start with maybe a picture of a loved one that you were close to, because I find that it's very easy to connect with those that we were emotionally connected to in real life, like in this lifetime. And then I also like to put symbolic things for my ancestral lineages. So, like say you're Celtic, putting some items that are specifically Celtic or Nordic or African or Asian, wherever you're from, like kind of putting some
Yeah,
symbolic things on there. I also put skulls on there, whatever makes me think kind of mortality too. I also make ofrendas, so I'll actually make a big altar with offerings put onto the altar, like food, drinks, libations. Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that we're very similar in how we connected to our ancestors. A lot of people might use tarot cards. A lot of people, on my ancestral shrine, all I would have to do is, set up the shrine, but then I would ask for a message, and I might draw a rune, or maybe I might draw 5 runes. Just however specific the message I'd want to be, I just basically draw as many runes as I could make sense of. So
Yeah.
if I did everything like that, but then drew runes, then I could actually get a message from wherever my ancestor is. At least the ego that is passed on, that's still tied to that personality. Maybe the soul has moved as far past that. I could communicate with that part of my uncle, for instance.
Yeah,
So
I've found that instead of using tarot to connect, that oracle cards have worked better for me to connect with ancestors. So what I'll do is I'll light all the candles on the shrine, and then I will usually burn sage. I'll have trance music on, and then I will basically go into like a shamanic journey, and then oftentimes I'll meet the ancestors once I go through the sacred tree on my shamanic journey.
hmm that makes sense. I've had journeys like that. I think mine have very much to do with Yggdrasil, which you also mentioned a tree, and connecting to different dimensions by using that as kind of a gateway itself. Um,
Yeah.
Now, as a recommendation for everybody out there, you can buy about 40 to 50 runes, small quantities that you can experiment with in a shell as far as burning or ingesting, on Amazon for about, shoot, I think this costs like $25 for about 40 different samples. So, for instance, you might get like red clover. I love clover for its purifying qualities. Another one is alfalfa leaf, which I haven't used much, but it's for money or attracting money, things like that. And what's really useful is on a lot of these herbs, there is the magical, as far as what you use them for. It's by Lisa's Creations, which I'd highly recommend because it has what it is and then what it's used for. So chamomile flower, money, sleep, love, purification. You might add that either into a potion or you might want to burn that into a shell combined with other herbs.
You can
Angelica
also,
root, I've
depending on the type of herb, you can also put them in little bundles and make kind of like a talisman with them.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, so Angelica root, exorcism, healing, protection, visions. I've used that before. I definitely feel the healing and protection from it. And bay leaf, dreams, healing, protection, visions, psychic powers, repels negative energy. That's another one. That's the last one that I'll talk about. But anyway, so that I don't make this video too long, so that we can get the whole video in, I'd like to say thank you very much, Ashley, for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anybody out there, feel free to shoot down in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to look at them. I'm sure Ashley would too, and to answer your questions to the best of our abilities. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see all of you on the channel in the future.